Welcome back to Frivolous Gravitas. You are talking to Jordan Roy, master of the archives, and me, Christopher Driver, the lowly author and starving artist. Today, we are appropriately discussing matters which concern all of humans based on our need for organization and self-determination and the passage of rights and distribution of wealth and etc., etc. We're basically talking about socialism, communism, capitalism, all the isms that keep getting jumbled together and bifurcated into extreme opposites. We've talked a bit about radicalization and how the feelings expressed and imposed upon people out of desperation or poverty or just circumstances beyond the control of any government or person, and how that affects people's responses to social engagements, such as protests and politics and the like.
I think one of all these isms, we pointed out that a lot of these isms actually constrain the debate because it keeps us from talking. We use these isms to not talk about something. So you say, oh, it's capitalist. Well, no, this is a specific aspect of a free market system. And we need to actually say that this is, currency exchange, or you can't just say capitalism or Wall Street because, well, that doesn't really have a conversation. And
unless you're on Wall Street and you know what they're talking about.
Yeah, unless you're on Wall Street and you're about to get in an appointment where it's like, oh man, this one should help me achieve quite a bit of capital.
Well, certain things, like some banks just reported earnings like yesterday and the day before, and like JP Morgan's up 20% year to date and 40% for Goldman Sachs year to date. Like during a pandemic and a crisis when people are losing their jobs and their homes, the owners of assets and the lenders of the society are the ones making bank and asking for like tax relief.
Those that create
after
no
all
value.
The stimulus got funneled directly into their bank accounts.
I don't know. Even though I'm definitely in favor of a free market, I do see certain regulations as helping, like, to limit the looting.
There's nothing free about socializing losses and privatizing gains. Like that's not even capitalism either.
Well, and like we've said on this channel before that like you can play the market, but you're not actually creating any value. You're not adding any value to the system, therefore, you're a jerk. Whereas, someone who goes off and, prospects and, it's like, oh, look, I have created a mine and jobs, and now the market has this much more stuff in it. And it's like you have just created a ton of value in the system.
Yes. Productivity is basically the name of the game.
So one of the things that's key in there and that we talked about and I didn't really get into is that of choice. And I think I want to get into this, but I'm going to get into it in a roundabout way because we're talking about radical redistribution of wealth to help those that are in desperate need right now. Well, there's lots of people that are in desperate need right now. I could come up with a reason why I'm in desperate need right now. Actually, I can. I'm doing pretty good today. But I'm pretty sure I could rile myself up if I gave myself like 10, 20 minutes. But one of the biggest examples of this happening is in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, where, if I give my biography like I did last time on this topic, I was lucky enough to be in a system that I could use my free will in order to not hurt others with the rhetoric I was spouting. And by that, I mean I was able to work my way into a place where I could thrive, where I wasn't just expected to be given stuff. Now, the Tsarist Russia was a non-functioning regime. It's there's a reason we don't do feudalism. So we have another ism here. We have capitalism, which is a Marxist word, and we have socialism, communism, which are exemplified by state redistribution of wealth. And then you have feudalism, which is hierarchical caste ownership based on military precedent upheld by theocratic justification of power. Yeah, it's not the best definition, but good enough. You have a king, and he's got vassals who are tied to him based on ties of essentially warfare. You own this because you will sacrifice your life theoretically in war if I ever call on you. Therefore, you're my man. And this is essentially just, if you think of the mob, that's what it is. The mob is a feudal structure. You have you're my man. There's a guy at the top, and there's just degrees of fealty that you owe. And everyone who's in the system is a made man. Everyone who's outside of the system is, well, it sucks. And so everyone at the bottom, the wealth definitely flows upwards. And this is what a lot of the early people were critiquing on every side in the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment philosophers, the proto-communists, proto-socialists, everyone was critiquing the system because the system sucked. So we got out of that for the most part. There's still some places in the world where, you have little pockets of feudalism. But it's, those are exceptions that prove the rule. It's gone.
For the sake of clarity, maybe I'll just read off the definition. So it's just a quick recap for everybody listening. So capitalism is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Socialism, a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole.
Nice and vague.
Communism is a political theory derived from Marx, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs.
Warfare is always good.
Yeah. Feudalism was a set of legal and military customs in medieval Europe that flourished between 9th and 15th century, blah, 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 like you said.
That's a terrible definition.
Yeah. It can be broadly defined as a system for structuring society around relationships derived from the holding of land known as fiefdom or fief in exchange for service or labor. In other words, slave labor.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. You're tied to the land. So this is what it was like in Tsarist Russia up until 1920 or until the October Revolution. Wow, all the communists are really yelling at me. I should know this. 1917. And so what happened was World War I happened. The Russian system was being tested actually, and it failed. They sent millions of men into war with, most of them had sticks instead of rifles, and maybe a couple, if they had bullets, they were lucky, up against a very well-trained and well-equipped German army who would mop the floor with them in every battle. And eventually, after 2 years of this, the Russians just kind of started, throwing down their sticks or their guns if they were lucky and just walking home. So, and they were, they're slaves. There's no upward mobility. There's no nothing. They're tied to the land, and they were sent by landholders for an aristocracy that doesn't care or think about them. 10 years previous, there was a massacre of the lower classes who were protesting about food riots, pretty much, and we just opened fire on them.
And it's important to describe that, though. People used to have to stand in line for hours to get a bread and egg food ration for their family. So, right. Even if they wanted or were capable of working, they spent all their time trying to get their rations, and the rations were being stolen and siphoned off, and people were stealing, obviously, because they wanted more for themselves. So,
right. So communism used to be about
food.
So the equity in communism used to be a lot more about, getting people 3 square meals a day. Well, people don't have that now. Now, a lot of this stuff that people talk about, it's like nowadays when they're using this rhetoric, it's like, oh, the people in this town don't have any of this or that. And then you just say well, yeah, they do. They don't have any freedom. Well, yeah, they do. Well, no, it's a fake freedom. Okay, now you're pushing it. But back then it was very much, the people don't have the practical means of survival, and therefore it's a fallacy that power comes from above. because the power from above is, easily, given ascent from the bottom. And sometimes you can trick the bottom, and but if you push them too far, nothing will, no amount of puppetry will trick them, and they'll just decide to overthrow you. Now, the Germans, being at war with the Soviet Union, sent one cheeky little guy called Lenin to back home to stir stuff up, and this worked. And it started a big long war between the whites and the reds, which culminated in the overthrow, the killing of the czars, and the overthrow of the monarchy, and the institution of a new Soviet Socialist Republic where everything's going to be great. You'll see. And so what they did immediately was they set up the country, after a long bloody war, which a lot of the Western nations, including Canada, got into, but they were so exhausted from the First World War that they're like, we'll send you a couple regiments, but like we can't. We're already broke. Like, we can't do anything. And that's a shame for the people of Russia. But because the people of Russia got short shrift really quickly. And so because there's no one thing it relies on is a focus away from individuality. So immediately you start seeing, okay, the worker, now you're a worker, you're your identity. And so you are stuck, you're rounded up and put into a Soviet, and all of a sudden you're a worker, and you'll be like, okay, now you're in charge. And, all of a sudden the factory owner's dead. And you and 5 other guys are sitting around going like, all right, you're in charge of the factory, and you're called, the Soviet of the local iron work in, Omsk or something. So now there's all these tiny little Soviets everywhere, and they're all trying to figure out how to work, and everyone else has been taken away, and everyone's got hope because it's like, we got this, we're gonna build it, we're gonna do it. And there's a lot of hope in the Soviet Union in the early 20s. That quickly dies. Lenin starts setting up camps, and the power starts getting centralized radically. Not very much as the feudalism, because feudalism, if you look at a feudal relation tree, it looks a lot like the land is based on, because
looks like a family tree, actually.
Well, it does, but it centers on the capital, and this is what happened in the Union. So it's like, oh, we can't handle it, we need to do this. So what happened was the Soviet Union in Moscow quickly kept taking on more and more and more of the tasks, more and more and more of the decision making that couldn't be made, because the workers became disenfranchised from the power that they had given, and they had no vote in the representation that was being forced on them. So the Soviet Union started saying, okay, we represent the workers, now the workers are in charge because we're in charge. All right. And everyone's like, yeah. You maybe point that gun somewhere else. So,
and the leadership was also part of the problem, right? Like, the factory is being run by government rather than a capitalist. They weren't motivated for efficient productivity. They were motivated to make their jobs as easy as possible and to get as much assistance from the capital as possible.
That started happening pretty quickly. You just tell Moscow that you...
there's a shortage.
And then you quota.
Keep commercials yourself.
Yeah. And so, though it worked okay not okay, but it worked, you got to rebuild after a war, no matter what. So rebuilding, that's okay. So they're rebuilding. So everyone's got hope, and they don't realize that rebuilding might not actually be happening as quick as it might have. And then Lenin gets sick, dies. No one listens to him, and they appoint Stalin as leader anyways. And Stalin really takes Lenin's philosophy to a degree. Now, Stalin's a bit of an idiot. I've read a bit of his work, and he's kind of he's a bit of a midwit. He
That's
thinks
putting
he's
it
smart.
lightly.
Yeah. So he had enough stuff to write and think about philosophical and use the word philosophy and come up
He
with
made he had these delusions of grandeur though. Like he would make these rash statements out of
well,
nowhere without any justification or rationale behind them and just assume them to be true. Like his assumptions were blind faith.
yeah.
Basically.
One example is like I was reading up on his idea of nationalism, and it just felt like reading like a student paper on what they thought nationalism was. It was like,
yeah,
okay,
I'm
it's like,
proud to be Canadian.
Look at me, Lenin. I defined nationalism, and Lenin's like, yeah, whatever. Okay, do your.
He probably stole it from a kid, like a baby Dostoevsky or something.
So this ex-bank robber is now in charge of your country. And everyone likes to think, oh, well, Stalin was actually just the worst. It's like, no, he was furthering policies. Trotsky wouldn't have been any better. Lenin, if he had survived, wouldn't have been any better. It was just, those policies, but harder.
How does he compare to Mussolini? Just for perspective.
Very similarly. Now, fascism is like state socialism with a
state communism. You
mean? It's very socialist state. It is kind of like that. Like the Nazi Party was the National Socialist Workers Party of Germany. Like the worker, yeah, you can see where that's coming from, but it's got a very romantic, nationalistic, as we would use it now that post World War II, you can't really get away from this language. They always had looked back on the glory of what we were, and we're going to rebuild that and to be that really orderly. So there's always that
kind of like MAGA. Make America great again. Trump's whole campaign was exactly the same.
I never get the sense that Trump was like that. It's more like the Tea Party guys before MAGA came about. Those guys, where they're emphasizing the aesthetic of America rather than what America they want to be. At least MAGA was like, what do we want America to be? It's like, but like the Tea Party was just like, they were reinforcing a shallow aesthetic of America. And luckily, no one took it seriously because America's just like, you know what, I'm going to do my job and not listen to you idiots. And so what the Mussolini did, now Mussolini was he was absurd, but all these guys were absurd. So
how do they compare though? Like just for context, because I don't really know the history behind both of them. But they work together, as far as I understand.
No. You're thinking Mussolini was a fascist. He worked with Hitler.
Oh, okay.
So, but Mussolini's one of my favorite things about Mussolini, not favorite, but like best stories was that it's like Mussolini got the trains to run on time. It's because he changed the clocks. Like he literally just made the clocks say that, oh yeah, it's on time. And so it's, moving the goalpost, but Stalin was more, it's definitely some 1984 shit. While it was written about him, it's pretty hard to
it's just pure control.
The kind of guy where one of my teachers put it, where he has a meeting where if you leave the meeting without pissing yourself, Stalin considers that a bad meeting. So that
says a lot.
That says, yeah, it's exactly that says a lot about his character and as a dictator. And a lot of these guys had that kind of power mentality, which we want to project onto all the people we hate politically, but this one actually had it. And people like to say that about Trudeau or Stephen Harper, but come on, that's just projection. This guy was gulag. And so what happened quickly, and this is if you want to have some PTSD, you can go read Solzhenitsyn and have an ant's eye view of what was happening, And so he quickly started looking for enemies, and they started looking for enemies before Stalin could get in control, because you want to maintain your regime, you want to strengthen it. And so the first thing you do, and we talked about this in our a couple of our earlier episodes, I think it was activisms, and you find someone to blame. So everyone outside the country, capitalists. You have some scapegoats, the engineers and the doctors and the kulaks, and then you disappear them. Now, what this created quickly was a slave labor class, which they sent out to the gulags. So anybody they didn't like just became a slave. So now, why did this happen? And this happened till from like 1930 to 1960 with waves of like more and more things. So they didn't have any engineers or doctors for like 10, 20 years, like good ones. They would just kill them and call them wreckers. So I wish I'd read that when I started school, but I didn't, because it was 400 pages of just absolutely the worst things humanity can do to each other. Now, why? Well, that's just that regime, and that's not communism. Well, if only we had a similar book that detailed, the Chinese Cultural Revolution, or
well, didn't they have a civil war in the last 100 years?
Yeah, well, Chinese history was they had a warlord period between the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1918 and 1949, with the major players being the American-backed Chiang Kai-shek, who was kind of a weirdo. And they all kind of came together to fight the Japanese, but once that stopped, they all came together to fight each other. And through a series of errors, the communists won and established their power. Now, the problem here isn't that, communism leads to this, communism leads to that. It's not communism in particular. It's what communism shares with other ideas of social organization, like feudalism and fascism and, just basic dictatorship, big man politics in ancient times. Strangely, not the Roman Republic at certain times. But which was actually very strange for history.
That is strange, considering especially how aggressive they were just by culture.
Well, they were warlike culture, but they were surrounded by enemies for their entire history. So you can't really not be warlike.
Not to mention everybody was warlike back then. That's how you survive and become historical. Now, they did have a
slave culture, but it was a very if you are a free citizen, you could do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, it wasn't, and really the slaves could buy their freedms too. So it wasn't like labor camps where you're wrapped in chains and you're freezing to death, starving.
Yeah, there was human misery. There was always human misery, and that's the rule. It's even the rule today. And the problem is that when the individual stops mattering in a society, well, you can do whatever you want with the people in your society. So right now, I'm an individual in society, and if something happens to me, that's really unjust, everyone goes on the news and we're like, you believe what they did to that Jordan guy? I don't even know who he is, but oh boy, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm not voting for this government anymore. Well, that's pretty cool. That's insane how that we can actually do that. But that's a very bombastic example. But what happens is people stop being people in these things. They start being part of the state, or they start being part of the thing. And the reason that this has effects economically is because you exploit that will towards heroism that a lot of us get. You want to do something heroic with your youth. Sometimes that means I invented a new mode of power. That's pretty heroic. I did a bunch of science heroically. I shot a bunch of kulaks. Wait, no, don't do that. But, enemies of the state. Well, who defines enemies of the state? Well, the state does. Well, that's pretty friggin' convenient. So to me, when the state starts denying an individual's individuality and it says, well, the state's more important, or the group is more important. Well, the group is obviously more important. I need to live in a group, but I'm a group of individuals. I'm not a group. The idea of the state can change, and we don't need to prop up the state. And that's a very old mentality it's a very 19th century mentality. You sacrifice yourself for the state, which is helmed by the great leader Bismarck or whatever.
I love that name.
He was a great guy. One of the guys. Just a brief aside. He was known as a warlord, but if you actually look at his policies, he actually didn't go to war as often as he probably could have, and he didn't actually do all that much fighting. He just made it seem like he was, so everyone kept voting for him, and so he could unify Germany. He's a shrewd politician.
It's also a good way to quell threats, to make other countries less prone to invasion or whatever.
Yeah,
it's an intimidation tactic, basically.
Yeah, but when you have a system that's like, okay, we need to centralize everything, which is what communism invariably does. Okay, communism, the way you defined it, you have class war. So we fight a class war to get rid of, okay, Jesus, that's fucked up already. But then you fight a class war so that we can overthrow and we don't have any oppressive class. Okay, so that depends on the fact that there's an oppressive class sitting there with their mustaches.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's go back to socialism. Okay, communism's stupid. Let's go to socialism then, where we just centralize redistribution of assets. It's like, okay, now there's still a problem in that, because now the government is the group and they decide who gets what. Now, upon what need? And this is kind of where I stopped getting interested in, because if I can make my own need, I don't need the government to give it to me. But then, and I can just, so it's kind of like what I did during COVID. I didn't have a job, and a lot of the jobs in my field are with the government. So I just made my own. I'm now teaching a lot. So, that's pretty cool. And now I'm making money. But if
that's the type of thing a government should be promoting, though, right? Like a capitalist government would be in favor of promoting people to start small businesses for selling their own goods and services.
Yeah. Make it easy for people to have startups. And it's like, well, we're going to put money towards it. It's like, no, just make it so I don't have to pay $1,600 to start a business.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, it's worse
like
in a lot
liability insurance and professional, like all your tools, your gas and accommodations. Meanwhile, like everything costs money. So in a capitalist system that's promoting small businesses, you might get forgiven on the first like 20,000 you make, so that at least you're stable before they start taxing you.
Yeah.
And that's almost a socialist.
But I would say that's very capitalist, because if just forgive the little guy, why? So that the big guys have to deal with competition.
Yeah, and you want their business
the big, and that keeps the big guys in line, because they know if they start screwing up, a little guy's going to come off with something new or with new equipment, being like, I didn't have to use this old equipment, I just bought all the new stuff.
Yeah, and it keeps people off unemployment too.
Yeah,
because they're employed right away with their own skills, with their own drive and determination.
But it's very
industriousness.
It's very subtle. And it's not like this big war that we have to have. Socialism, well, these things I'm talking about are very subtle. I remember being in Italy, talking to people. I'm just like, oh, everyone's just waiting for a job here. And I was like, what the heck you mean waiting for a job? Like, go and find, well, there's no jobs. We have to wait for the government to give us one. It's like, you're a free country. Go start a grocery store or something. Like, what do you need? Like, there's tons of pots everywhere.
You need government approval. That's the problem with them.
Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, so I need government approval to do something. But the government, if it's in, Ottawa, like I'm in Alberta, you're in Manitoba. And if they're in Ottawa and they say, you know what, we're dealing with something that's happening in Quebec, which we feel is more important. It's like, so I can't start a farm without someone coming here and arresting and, serving me with, the fact that I'm like committing some economic brutality.
Oh, don't forget, you have to pay to upgrade your facility to code. You got to make sure that you've got
if I want to make a deck, I have to get it okayed by the government.
You got to register GST numbers for taxation purposes.
So what this does is it makes us spend more time dealing with all this stuff. Now, if you take that to the umpth degree, now this is kind of great, because like a lot of these are based on like policies that made sense, but a lot of them are just campaign promises of like 3 politicians ago that, actually were delivered upon, and now we have to deal with it. So that's part of the nature of our system, but we can also be like, that's done, let's get rid of it. And then we can do that. Now, if we take it to its extreme, like in the Soviet Union, well, your grain, you do your grain because you're told to go there. Well, first of all, do you want to be a farmer? It's the same thing we were talking about last episode, where it's like, oh, mandatory military service. Not everyone's cut out to be a soldier. Well, not everyone's cut out to be a farmer. Like,
especially not me.
And that's the thing. You're taking away someone who would be a masterful woodworker maybe, and you're putting them on a farm. And what you're doing is you're diminishing the value of everyone in the country by having that person pick grain instead of work wood, or doing something that they would put ample effort into. And what happens is when you start regulating this, people start regulating each other. So you start getting people like, oh, someone's working really hard over there. And you see this in unions, that story where it's like, you're glad to have a job. You don't even notice that there's a union, and all of a sudden someone says, you need to stop working so hard. You're making the rest of us look bad. And everyone's got a story like that.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. Like, what do you mean?
I'm at work.
Yeah.
Why am I not supposed to work?
So that's something that happens in every, you're making us look bad. It's like, well, maybe you suck. And like,
or maybe they should just pay you a little more than everybody else. Like, what would be the terrible problem with that? If they just paid one person time and a half who works like 50% more than everybody else should just be okay having an easy job and not losing any money. Like, why would they bother?
Well, if he's working more, I want and you didn't call me in, I want to get that time and a half that he's got too, because I could have done that, but you didn't let me. It's like,
it's that selfishness that gets in the way. It's that human nature is the problem.
When you put everyone in that, everyone's instead of working, everyone's working for the state, but then everyone's afraid of each other, and then they end up having to work just to survive. And then that pits them against each other. But in a Soviet system, you get any deviance becomes outlawed. And this happens in not so much in feudalism, because in feudalism, if you're deviant, you just get stabbed or die. Yeah. Because never mind. The Magna Carta, Hanseatic League, blah blah blah. But the deviance is just labeled as something. It becomes the enemy, and then you can't do it. Now, in our society, one thing we do well is deviance is looked at as like, what are they doing over there? I don't know. Is it working? Yeah, a bit. Why don't we do that too? So all of a sudden we have a new method of teaching children. All of a sudden we have a new technology. All of a sudden we have a new way of organizing taxis or something. I don't know.
To me, this is all stemming from the Industrial Revolution. Once we realized the production lines were highly efficient and people could do it safely and everybody prospers more from it, we just started applying it to everything. So you might as well have one really good teacher teach 30 kids instead of every parent trying to teach their kids individually. And then you have some kids that come out geniuses and some kids that learn.
Look at YouTube. Now, even now, on YouTube, we have this digital revolution, and now you have someone who can teach 30 kids, and then they go put their thing on YouTube, and all of a sudden they're reaching 30,000 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
that's how I learned neural nets, was just through YouTube. And there's so many lectures and diagrams and animations and movies people put together to help people learn. I absolutely free. The digital revolution is a step up from the Industrial Revolution, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, in the Industrial Revolution, farming sucked. Yeah. It was hard on you. It's bad for your health. You're in the sun all day. You get skin cancer. You're breathing in dirt, and you're working with poo with your hands all the time. And all of a sudden you get to go inside where there's shade. Yeah, there's noxious gases, but it's still better for you. But and we quickly, relatively, figured out how to improve worker conditions. We did all this, and yes, the workers pushing for these things over the course of the 19th century, with help from the communists, did do a lot of good. 16-hour work.
There to me strikes the importance of having a communist system, not a system, but a communist party in the system, because their influence is enough to be good for everybody, even if they never win elections.
Here's a counterpoint. Why do we have to have a communist system when we can just have worker representation? The thing
because capitalists don't naturally do that. You don't walk up to Jamie Dimon and be like, why don't you pay your bankers more? And he'd be like, because I don't have to.
Right.
That's my job, is to make money and cut margins and scalp pennies everywhere.
This goes down to the ism. I don't have to be a communist to believe in workers' rights, because I don't need a class war to lobby the government to put filters in the fucking factory so that they
And that
have
right there
actual
to me
air.
is socialism, because it's taking what's really bad about capitalism, it just extracts that out and makes that part illegal, and then everything else is capitalist. Like
Right.
socialism isn't even nearly left.
Right.
Strictly
So
speaking, capitalism, but just a step down from exploitation.
right, and it's a lot of that is intention. A communist will be doing it so that he can, with the free market and destroy things, and he's looking for a class where he wants conflict. A socialist will, a unionist will be interested in rights, but the thing is that unionists can go too far, which is why
And
there's
often do.
contention. Like look at Via Rail and Canada Post. Like I was told when I wasn't even working for Canada Post, I was working security at a Canada Post building, not to even look at this one woman from the other guys that were working there, because she will put you up on charges because she gets her kicks off or something on like making sexual harassment charges. And so I was told, if you see this woman walk by, turn around, don't make any eye contact, do this, do that, and like you're playing with fire, just acknowledging her. And I was just like, 10-4, got it. Like, and the fact is, like, they were saying like the unions just got her back, so you're not even in the union, so it doesn't matter. Or those things like if one person gets called into work, they have to pay everyone's wage who gets pulled into work. Now, for me, I get paid for services rendered, period.
Exactly.
Like I do work, and like if people all pay you before it happens, it's like, yeah, all right, but if I don't do it, I'm giving you your money back. We're fair business. This is a mutual exchange. I'm not here to, how can I, get this people's money without any effort? And I hate that mentality, because, a lot of people see the government like that. Like, oh, I'm on disability. I don't even have to work. It's like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? Do you need a friend? Do you want to go for a beer?
But the worst thing is the government response to it is like, well, if people are going to do that, then we're going to give them less than what they need to live. So then people who legitimately are disabled can't afford to live.
Well,
because
and
of
the
the
people that are abusing the system are hurting the people that are actually need that. Like disabled people who like, I need to live, and I need money to live. And I lost my eyes and hands in an accident, so I need help to live. And we agree that, the individual is more important than the system, so we're going to let this person live, even though they're in this.
But it's not even about letting them. You're not allowed to die in Canada. Like if you tried to get euthanized just because you lost your hands and your sight, they'll say, no, that's not enough to get euthanized.
Yeah.
Like they'll make you live and then not give you enough to eat.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
And so, but then you have, like, it's easy to exploit because, I don't know, there's no checks and balances. But the point is, and I think, was it Blythe? James Blythe?
Mark Blythe?
Mark Blythe. He does his, now I'm definitely I definitely lean towards, pull yourself up by your bootstraps a bit, take some personal responsibility, blah, 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 that whole, like, you're an asshole shtick. Because, well, one, I put some effort in and I got rewarded for it. Not like, I don't like drive around a Lamborghini. I still have a Nissan, but I feel like, I put work in and I got it. And I'm like, okay, just, put some work in and you can get it. But at the same time, Mark Blythe's book, Why Was It Austerity Matters? His book on austerity. And
Angrynomics is really good too. His latest.
Yeah, I got to read that one actually. But austerity, and he makes a case for us against austerity and why we should have some social programs. And his case is that if I hadn't gotten some of this money, I wouldn't be here to write this book for you, because I would not have gotten education and I would have been a delinquent. And, watching this guy speak, you can definitely believe that, because he's a cheeky motherfucker. So
he's a typical Scot.
Yeah, he's of the
he's actually a lot like David Hume, now that I think about it. Anyway,
yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'll buy that. David Hume, just think of him with a wig. Gotta bring wigs back. Anyway, so to me, that's that forced so there is some, the reason, like so in a free society, the reason I'm against, you know what, F it. The whole contention of this point isn't communism versus free market, capitalism. It isn't versus this or that. It's, do you believe in the rights of the individual, or do you believe in a collective system where the system matters more than the individual? That's it. Now there's negotiation in there, which is why we have programs, social programs that help people. And whether we call it socialism or not doesn't really matter, as long as they're actually helping people. But if we do it from a place of I have the freedom to help people and therefore I shall, therefore I will let the government take some of my taxes and put it towards a universal healthcare system. It bugs me sometimes, especially when you get someone coming in. I hear stories of people being like, oh, I can get any healthcare I want because blah, 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 blah. I don't have to pay for anything. It's just like,
but it's better they do that to stimulate the economy. It's better they do that than pay people to do nothing. You're better off having people go to have nurses practice nursing, even to people that don't need it, and pay a nurse, than to have that nurse not working.
But the thing is that universal healthcare in Canada isn't done strictly at the point of a gun. We have a choice to vote on certain policies. Some of them will work, some of them won't. I'm looking at you, Manitoba, right now. Specifically, Palliser's firing of all the nurses and stripping the healthcare system over the course of the last 3 years. Just look into it.
But you've got semi-private systems in different provinces. Like even in BC, I had to pay for my medical, even though I was Canadian. I had to pay a supplementary thing because of my salary. Because I made X amount of money, you have to pay a certain amount. So they only charge people who can afford it. And then they just charge them basically the same price as an insurance premium, which to me is fair. Like I didn't like paying it because I'd finally gotten a job where I wasn't poor and they were taking money from me.
Well, the other thing is that like I don't like paying for it, but I also don't like being sick.
That's the thing. Like I recognize the benefit of having that system just available whenever I get sick, that I don't have to like have all of my life savings go towards.
Part of my contention is that doctors and dentists get paid too much. Like fight me. You're just doctors, you're not special. But at the same time,
considering how much politicians get paid though, I'd much rather be a doctor.
Like, I think if you're a public employee, but like at the same time, they do need to be paid because you're doing work, you are rendering services. And that's kind of like, well, school should be free. Yeah, but who's going to pay for it? Or, well, medicine should be free. It's like, well, yeah, because, you know, you have the right to life and health.
The easy answer to that is just make everybody pay an equal fair share. So like when you make tons of money, you shouldn't have a marginal tax rate that's below people who make less than minimum wage. So
going back
to get the money for it, you just have to tax the people who are already avoiding taxes.
Yeah.
The reason our taxes are as high as they are is because people who can afford to pay them aren't paying.
Now, the thing that's happening here is we're having debate and we're allowed to talk about it. If we're criticizing the system, and we're allowed to do this. Now, if we have the ability to talk, raise an issue, and discuss it and come up and argue with people that disagree with us, and then maybe in a while come up with a good system based on our individual effort put into the problem. And we have a choice to actually deal with the problem as an individual or a group of individuals. In a collective system, regardless of what ism it is, well, you get what you're served and you'll enjoy it and you don't have any choice. And that kills any opportunity. There's no point in trying to get upward mobility. And because like you could be cut down at any moment by some policy that you have no say in. So I think that's where I sit now with regard to this. And
so you're against the extreme version of it.
Well, there's always debate. There's
no
always debate.
Further extreme than that. That's as far as it goes. When someone controls what you do for a living, that's as extreme as the system can get, basically.
Yeah, that's why I own guns.
So a less extreme position would be the government helps people who don't have employment. And if you can get your own job and stuff, they leave you alone.
Yeah.
Like it should just be there as a backup.
Yeah.
And then if a company needs an employee, there should be a place or a resource. The government can say, hey, we've got these people who are available. We'll only charge you half rate because they're not, because you're going through us instead of going through the private sector yourselves. Like they could offer incentives to hire unemployed people who are on unemployment or disability.
Oh, yeah.
They just don't.
The government's there for two things: to do our paperwork and to act as a safety net. And if you're down at the safety net, like no one should hit the ground. Well, people are still going to hit the ground.
We're rich enough that nobody should hit the ground. Like we grow food and export it. There's no reason anybody in this country should be hungry. Well,
you can't get to zero because humans have a very fantastic way of fucking with systems. And
okay, but let's say you've got a social insurance number and a monthly allotment for food. Anybody should be able to just swipe a social insurance card and get food. That should be really straightforward.
I'm thinking more accidental, more like, me getting lost out in the snowstorm and then I starve to death in the middle of nowhere. It's like, well, there's social programs to deal with that, but I got fucked by circumstance. That's okay. That's allowed to happen.
Yeah, that's inevitable.
Yeah, that's inevitable. But you're never, and that's the thing, you're never going to get like vision 0 or something. You're never going to get 0%, but you can make it so it's not, so people don't get fucked by like things. And what happens in that system is that you let people, once you bounce them off of the safety net, what do you get? You get a bunch of people who, instead of just being like, no, tell me what to do, they're like, okay, government's like, now what do you want to do? Well, I like working with trees. All right, go be a park ranger. Here, we'll give you some money to go to school to become a park ranger. It's a good job. Why not? You can put yourself, and that's the thing, you can decide where to put yourself. And the individual will put more effort into something they enjoy doing, woodworking or whatever, and wherever they end up, because it's their choice.
But the only opposition I ever hear to socialism is the radical, most extreme version of socialism. And they ignore all the socialism that we love and endear about our country. When you say like, why is it so great to live in Canada? You say, we've got public pools, we've got parks, we've got firefighters, we've got police officers, we've got hospitals, we've got grocery stores. Like the list goes on and on and on about all the social services that socialism benefits us, the capitalists wouldn't do just naturally.
I think a lot of the problem
system, and kids wouldn't get educated just like the States does with their voucher and privatization programs.
To me, I think that a lot of people worry not about socialism. A lot of people worry about socialism and socialism creep turning into, because there's always those people who you meet who are like, oh yeah, I'm a socialist and I can't wait to see, like, you see like, oh, all rich people should be outlawed. I'm like, oh, fuck you, by the way.
Yeah, that's like, not socialism.
What happens if I accidentally make $1 billion? Oops.
That's extreme socialism.
No, but I've heard that from like,
I hear that all the time. Everybody.
But at the same time, I want to debate social programs. No, we need to implement this now. It's like, it won't work. Would you off? Like a lot of the social, like not every social program actually acts as a good net. Some of them there's a lot of them that don't do anything, that are there to make the government look good.
Most of them are tax evasion, tax shelters.
That too.
Most organizations that are non-profit, they funnel money from profitable companies into them and pay out staff.
Well, every time they ask you for money at the grocery store, like that money is just a tax write-off. It has nothing to do with charity. Oh, would you like to donate to this or that? You say no. Say no. That money's not actually going.
Donate yourself. Don't donate through them.
Right. And that's the thing. You can help as an individual. As an individual in a free society, you can start your own soup kitchen. You have enough money, buy something, start cooking soup, and go.
And if you don't, just mail $1 to a soup kitchen. They'll use it. Trust me.
Oh, yes.
If they get an anonymous $1, and you got a return address, they'll even send you a receipt for the $1.
Go in and like talk to them. And if you think they're on the level, be like, what do you need? And they'll be like, we need salt. And be like, but at the same time, like a lot of the worry is, and I think rightly, is that you give them almost a cookie and they want a glass of milk. And if you give someone, you don't want in our society where we require individuals to work on their own volition, you don't want them to get used to being given things.
But think about this. How many people would choose to live their entire lives owning nothing but bare necessities? Like, most people want more out of life. And for the ones that don't, they're not going to work anyway. Like, no matter what. They'll live off charity for their lives, whether there's a safety net or not. But for the people who need it, those people compound productivity by being useful and productive. Because not only are they not taking from the system over a long period of time, like we're not talking about assistance for a month or two. I'm talking about like food and shelter, things that people need in order to be productive.
And I think
like transportation. Why? They're subsidizing transit, but if somebody still can't afford transportation, they're never going to get a job except if there's one immediately around their neighborhood.
I've known a couple bus drivers who will just be like, get on here, I don't care. Like, or they'll pay the fare.
You can't bank on it. You can't say,
you can't.
I got a scheduled appointment to make.
At the same time, you can't just, I feel like
transit.
We also can't
afford cars, they'll buy cars. They're not going to ride transit just because it's free.
I'm a lot of the time, like if you give someone something, like anything free is worth what you pay for it. It's something I always say. And if you give someone something, they won't appreciate it. If you make them work for it, they'll take care of it. And that's one of my contentions with it. Now, it's not universal because we do have to help people, and sometimes people need a free meal. And I've been given a lot of free meals and I've been grateful for everyone. But when it, historically it's come with strings. You look at something like Rogue to Wigan Pier by George Orwell, and he goes and lives with the poor people, and he has to go and listen to a sermon, and all the poor people are like, I'm not that hungry. I can just be like, I don't have to eat. But I think a lot of it is, I had a point and I just went helium balloon into space. I think a lot of it is, dang it.
Maybe I can try and pick up where you left off. I think what you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it'll spark your memory. I think a lot of it comes down to how people approach the label. It's the ism itself that's scaring people away from having cogent conversations about things that are useful to everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the themes of our whole talk here is that, the label doesn't help. Just the helping helps. And if whatever label you give it, as long as it helps, and when it stops helping, like when it comes with strings, it doesn't help in the long run. Like, oh, good, I got a meal. Oh no, I have to march with these guys. Oh no, they're giving me a rifle. Oh no, I'm pointing it at people I like.
Yeah, what's our name? Taliban? Oh, okay.
Yeah. But a lot of things, and this is one of the things that I'm thinking we're forgetting, is that in an individual society, in a collective society, the individual doesn't matter. And yes, you don't matter unless you actually make yourself matter, in which case you got a fight ahead of you.
I disagree, but I'm a philosopher.
Well, here's what I'm saying. This is a philosophical stance. A lot of people in our society are forgetting that they matter and then they can make a difference. It's like, oh, what can I do? And everyone sees them at the head of a barricade with their rifle, with their fist up, going, yeah, we're gonna do something. We're gonna change everything. And it's like they're gonna make this big thing. And the thing is that that's not what making a difference means. Making a difference means caring for those around you. Making a difference means being compassionate and listening. Making a difference
cleaning
means
up your neighborhood.
Yeah, picking up garbage. Like being a good citizen, speaking up when you need to, having the courage to risk something because you think you're right, having the courage maybe to start that venture because you think will help. I want to start a school, do it. Oh, I want to start a business, go for it. Well, it's going to be hard. Yeah, it's going to be hard, but that's how you make a difference. Well, I want to play saxophone. Awesome. We need saxophonists. What else are you going to do? Oh, what do you mean? I'm just going to play saxophone. You know what? You are worth
can do
more.
That when you're off work.
Well, the thing is that everyone has such a low idea of their worth that they think that, I'm only capable of just doing one thing. Well, if you apply yourself, you can become more than you are. And they think that because they don't have any worth, they can't make a difference, and therefore they have to rely on somebody else to make a difference for them.
Or there's that extreme opposite where they think they're so worthwhile already that they don't have to learn anymore. They just think that they should show up and get paid. You know how many people I worked with in an office where they just think that being there is their right to a paycheck, whether they're on their phone, or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. They just think being there earns them a paycheck.
Yeah.
Like so many people are like that, especially millennials. And I hate to say it because I'm a borderline millennial, but my work ethic compared to my peers, is dramatically different. I noticed that just going to university as a mature student 5 or 6 years after graduating high school, not immediately after. Just the culture difference, like it felt like a different culture entirely, where they were complaining about like their parents giving them only $100 to buy a pair of pants, and that's like my yearly budget for clothes.
There was a rich kid in my wife's class who was talking about how he had to buy can't believe they're making us pay for this with our own money, and he's got to buy a stethoscope, and it's like $170. And like he held a party like a couple months previous to that, where in like the most expensive condo building in the city, and we're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I think you might have it a bit too good. But at the
my
same
roommate
time,
in BC was washing his underwear in the kitchen sink and like eating potato patties, but he owned his condo out there. Like, oh, I can't afford anything, except 250 grand in cash for this place and my car and my clothes and my jewelry. And like, come on, buddy. Like, I eat out of that sink.
And I think a lot of it also is that we need to like forgive people for their stupid mistakes like that. Like, that's just dumb decisions. Like, but when you make it about like something outside of you, I think when you make your problems external, it's easy to get away with doing violence. While they're forcing you to do this, who's they? They, the amorphous they of the, well, you get this with like, the Nazis did this and like with anti-Semitism, making the Jews the they, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like when what was that when I said some Jew 6,000 years ago just sitting around a fire going like, hey guys, get around here, it's big brain time, we're gonna rule the world. Like, come on.
Yeah. The Bilderberg group, that's what we'll call it.
Yeah. We'll change names this like soon, and then Izzy Asper will do this. It's like, come on, off. It's dumb. So
yeah, if beings were that well organized and planned that far ahead, it would be so much easier to just plan a working society than to do that.
Heck, if the Jews could do that, I would let them. But like,
anybody could do that.
But like, it's so much easier just to say, oh, I'm insufficient. Not because of me, not, taking myself seriously or just, doing an honest day's work. I'm insufficient because of the Jews or the kulaks or this or that other group, rather than because they see that, because when you stop thinking yourself as an individual, it's easy to not think of others as individuals, and then you can guilt-free pop them off in a civil war, which is no fun. So I think I'm running out of brain power here, and I think I've said my piece. So any thoughts?
I'd like to make a couple comments if you'd indulge me.
Yeah, I think I've said everything I need to, and I'm running out of, I'm starting to ramble and repeat myself. First
and foremost, when people discuss any matters of socialism, it should be noted that there's a big or in the definition there, and regulation by a community could mean regulation by a democracy. In other words, everybody participates in that regulation. In other words, it's not oppressive. It's not dictatorial. It's not totalitarian. It's not authoritarian. It is literally democracy to socialize common assets or resources from a country that everybody owns collectively.
Right.
So first and foremost, whenever you hear socialism, it is not the radical extreme, even though that's what people are commonly attributing socialism to. They're equating it as equal value to communism, and they're equating communism as equal value to dictator. And those aren't mutually exclusive. There are tons of working communes. You just don't hear about them because they're not on the news, because they don't have broadcasting stations and stuff.
Well, plus it doesn't work on any level bigger than that, though. And it's like
Hawaii's got colonies, Manitoba's got colonies, North Dakota's got colonies. There are Mennonites, Hutterites. There are tons.
Well, the thing about those, actually, that's a really good example, is because the Hutterites, the Mennonites, they do have those communes, and they are, by the definition, communist. Well, they don't have the class war, but they don't really have class. But at the same time, they have very strict rules and traditions in their society that they had to give up and sacrifice in order to live like that. And that's perfectly okay.
But it's voluntary, though.
It's voluntary.
It's not a government that's imposing it. If they ever wanted to escape, the government would help them get out of it. That's the thing.
And
there's no oppression there.
A lot of them are like voluntary leave it. They're allowed to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, they're raised
like,
not to and stuff.
a lot
So
of them,
like there is psychological problems with it. It's not
well,
perfect.
yeah, but
Definitely not a perfect system.
no system is
But
perfect.
it exists. That's
at the
my
same
point.
time, what you said about radicalism and the radicals, that only applies unless you look them up and they like say, oh yeah, I'm not a radical, and you look at them up and you look at their profile on social media and it says, I'm a radical socialist. It's like, okay. Now sometimes you get someone who's just like, you know what, I'm there for workers' rights. Yeah, it's socialism. Who cares? That's the normal person. And yeah, you can slippery slope that, but generally, if you just help people, great. But definitely.
But it's not a curse word or a slur. It's not a negative thing to be socialist. No matter how much you hear it on the news that, oh, that socialist is going to take over your country and steal your food and your guns. That's just not what socialism is. That's a boogeyman that they're fabricating so that they can maintain the wealth and control and power they already have to write the rules and the laws of the game that they're winning.
When they use words like that, you should not take that media seriously. It's like, oh, they're socialists, or they're fascists, or they're this or that, or they're some ism. That's a good sign that you should probably find another way to get your information, because that's political speak. That's not realistic speak.
Yeah, the useful terms, the only time that they're useful is when we take the terms to their meanings. And when you can misconstrue meanings like that, the term itself becomes a red herring. You're using it broadly with the intent of making people misunderstand rather than understand. So it's deliberately unfocused. And I think that's the harm in the isms and
to me,
socialism.
Communism itself, like communism, definitely is a bit of an actual problem. I think James Lindsay definitely has done a lot of work on this with its work on communism as a religion, which I found really interesting. And it's not a religion of peace, the class war inherent to it. At the same time, you have the equivalent, which is, the religion of nationalism, which those definitely are dog whistles for something that you should avoid. But yeah, if someone's talking about socialism on the media, they're probably trying to get you angry at something. And don't let yourself get angry at stuff that, you don't really need to be angry about for no reason. And
the second thing I wanted to get to, as you said, you'd indulge me.
I knew there was a second one. So
there's more than two.
Okay.
So the second one I wanted to get to is, economically speaking, if capitalism is premised on the economic benefits for all people and freedoms of prosperity, the economic benefits of looking after people socially so that they can become tax-paying contributors or employees to your company, which in turn make you money, addressing homelessness and poverty is actually in everybody's economic best interest. The only reason we don't do it is because we're nearsighted and we look from quarter to quarter. And that's just based on regulations for the way that we tax people and the way that we report our finances and the way that corporations are required to report to shareholders is all based on quarterly numbers. So when those numbers are nearsighted, just like the political foresight is only 4 years ahead of time at most. And that's from the day they step into office. Because after that, they're just trying to get reelected because that's their job. But these people aren't leaders of countries. They're symbolic leaders of parties. And the party is a democratically elected group of individuals all representing their constituents, idealistically speaking. So if you want to get active, be active in the way that we address democracy. Because democratizing the wealth distribution based on productivity rewards people like you who work hard. It doesn't reward people who don't work hard but get margins from a bank and earn percentages or commissions on billions of dollars that had to be spent with or without that person's involvement. So like to pay a banker by percentages and then to pay a laborer on a fixed per hour wage that they can't afford to live on is ludicrous, because one is providing an immediate social benefit to providing food to people and stocking shelves, and the other is doing something a computer can and is doing already, providing liquidity in the market. Trading shares and futures doesn't actually grow a crop. Growing a crop grows a crop. If anybody should get a commission or a percentage from the benefits of that, the yield should go either to the country through taxation or to the farmer, who then pays taxes. It shouldn't go to the one guy who's not paying taxes or contributing.
Well, with that in mind,
That's
you're
not
right.
capitalism.
And with that in mind, I think these social programs to bring people from starving, the focus in our society should be to bring them to a place where they can participate, and not just to, well, this is a life support net. It's not a life support net. It's to, all right, let's get you standing up. What do you want to do? You want to do that? All right, let's get you a place. And the focus is to bring them into the economy, not to, make them dependent on it, like a serf, or as just, well, you're reserve labor, or you are, your manpower in cases of a war. It's like, oh, geez, it's terrible. What you want as many people, and our society works when as many people are working in diverse ways as possible of their own volition. It sounds like chaos, but these programs that when somebody falls, and I think that is, we don't want the government to be taking care of people. We want the government to be like, all right, let's dust you off and get you up. What do you want to do? That kind of thing. I like to get them participating, because the more people participating, the more varied work we have getting done, the more ideas we have in the market, that kind of thing. And we need these people up on their feet, not, well, you just want more people working. It's like, yeah, because working people are psychologically more healthy than people who aren't, period. And if we get them a job, even if it's stuck on a shelf, that person is going to be less likely to commit suicide. They're going to be less likely to do harm onto others. They're going to be more social. They're going to be more well-adjusted. And if we can do that for a large amount of people and get them integrated, then all of a sudden we have another 100,000 people creating value in the system and are better behaved, which just sounds bad, but like...
And again, to point out, it's double the benefit, because not only are they not costing, they're also producing. So it's not even a matter of cutting costs by getting them off of social services. It's a matter of spending on social services in order for them to eventually start paying for other people's social services. That's how the whole system works. That's how it's designed. Like, that's why people retire, is because the working age people can feed the retired and the children who are coming up. And then you pay for the children coming up so that they can build a better world, so that when you retire, they can look after you when you're not working.
Well, that's why they come out of retirement, because they like, I want to keep contributing and I want to keep integrated. I want to stay integrated and talk to people, because the thing is that if you're at work, generally you're probably going to be...
But even as a purely economic decision, it's everybody's best interest as a pure radical capitalist to be socialist. It's in everybody's best interest for it. And there is science and studies to back that up. Like Google Scholars, you can do a quick search and you'll find tons of, maybe you can do that while I address my next point. Oh, I guess we're going to wrap up anyway. Maybe we'll do a separate episode on that.
Well, your next point was a separate episode?
No, that point.
Okay, what's your third point?
The last one I'm going to make really quick is just examples. I mean, if you need examples, look into like the Texas power grid and why it failed and how it wouldn't have failed in Canada or anywhere else that's got a national regulation system. You can look up the way the environmental protections in the light of climate change, like
this is why I say regulated free market, so that but
that's socialism. That's the definition.
Yeah, I don't feel like... I feel like socialism is a politically loaded term that makes it like, oh, see, it's socialism. That
the news made it dirty. People misusing the
socialists
word,
make it dirty.
Something different.
So the thing is that it's just regulating a market. That's all it is. And I don't feel the need to call it socialism.
It's a community regulated market, though. It's regulated through democracy. That's really important to underscore.
Yeah.
Because it's not just one person, some dictator that's regulating everything. It's the electorate, the actual voting base, the citizens of the country who are deciding how the country should distribute
deciding
its own
that
assets.
Insider trading is, nicht good. So like we can cut that off, because that'll harm our system. That'll actually do more harm. So we have these regulations, and it's the law system that we have is liquid enough that we can actually make these changes without a dictator being like, well, we're going to do this and this and this. And the dictator is obviously going to make 3 wrong decisions for every one decision he makes right.
But even democracy will make wrong decisions. But at least in a democracy, we can learn from our our mistakes, and we can have teachers teach them.
Yeah.
So like a teacher can use that as an example and say, because we have public schools, the public school can then have a publicly funded teacher tell the students, hey, when you grow up, don't do this because this is what happened.
Well, if a collective regime makes a mistake, the whole point of the regime is that the whole is the best thing in the world. And if it makes a mistake, well, then there's a problem with the whole. Well, then why are we in charge? No, it wasn't a mistake. It was actually part of when we're playing 4D chess, you wouldn't understand. And like
that pat on the head thing.
Yeah. And so don't worry about it. It's like you're suffering now, but it's for a cause, or it's because someone else did it. We didn't make any mistakes. It's like, if you're so smart, why haven't we defeated the bad guys yet? And then you. But
I'm just going to rattle off a couple other examples that we.
Yeah.
Like deforestation, mineral rights, Aboriginal rights, and property rights, the justice system, how we adjudicate through between laws and distinguish between cases.
The fact that everyone is required to have a lawyer, whether they can afford one or not.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like a government-funded representation, and you're guaranteed that whether you're even born here or not. Everybody gets equal rights because you're a human being, and that's based on a socialist objective. A capitalist one would just say, well, is this guy earning enough money to be worthwhile, or should we put him in jail and make him a laborer?
That's not based on a socialist thing. That's based on a classical liberal philosophical basis. But
economic principles suggest that socialist governments would do this because it makes more sense. Whereas a capitalist government would do what it's always done in history, slavery. That's always what capitalism does. When it's unadulterated and unbridled, it constantly devolves into slavery, whether that's through apartheid, or that's through prison camps like Gaza, or it's through like North Korea, or like every type of system that becomes...
That I'm going to disagree with you on, because a lot of those came from pre-capitalist systems. And a whole lot of them are holdovers and from, I guess, scientific racism in South Africa, and like feudal policies and pre-modern policies, and the fact that slavery as an institution took a very long time to die, and it required a lot of mental gymnastics from a lot of cunning philosophers to actually kill it.
But my conjecture is the governments are allowing it by not regulating. Because it's strictly capitalism, and you can run a business however you want in South Africa, you're allowed to deny black people if you're a white shop owner.
Right.
You're not allowed to do that in Canada because we're socialist. You're not allowed to do that in Sweden because they're socialist, or England.
So my contention is that the term socialism is not as... It comes with too much baggage, and it seems to be better that we have a free system that's regulated through a social contract.
Absolutely.
And to call it socialism brings along with all that, Marxist baggage, which doesn't help. And so that's where I'm going to sit. I'm going to still continue to use socialism as a swear word, but still think that regulation is. And like whether or not you say that's still socialism, no, it's not socialism.
But you're just choosing to misuse the word, though.
I'm not misusing
because it's convenient. Yeah. It's convenient to not throw...
I know where the word comes from, but I'm gonna, I don't believe in pure capitalism. Hell no.
I'm not asking you to, but that's what
But everything that's not pure capitalism isn't socialism.
Well, it is, yeah.
No.
As soon as you start regulating from the interests of the community, that's socialism. That's what the social...
I'm wondering why you're reliant on the word.
Well, that's what we were talking about. Socialism.
Right. But I'm saying... the bent towards the reliance on Marxism and socialism lends itself to away from it and towards the collective thought. Whereas if we just call apples apples instead of giving it a ism, then we can actually deal with the actual thing.
Well, what you're doing is avoiding calling an apple an apple. You're saying, well, everybody calls it a pear, so I'm going to call it a pear. I'm telling you to call it an apple, and you're saying no.
No, because
that's not how people...
I'm regulating a free market without regard and denying Marxism. That's all I'm doing.
But it's a community regulation. That's the key word. Like
Right,
you
but
can
we live in a
regulate a capitalist market in favor of all the capitalists. That's what they do broadly
right,
speaking in
but
America.
we're living in a social contract no matter what. Like we're always regulating each other no matter what. We're just doing it with regard to a common law system and legal and government regulations. Whether or not however the social contract is constructed, there's always regulations in a system. So
only in Canada, not everywhere.
No, literally everywhere. It's part of living
Iraq,
in
Afghanistan, they have social contracts like that. But if you don't have money, you go to jail. And if you have money, you don't.
Right. Their social contracts suck.
No, that's capitalism. That's capital saying this dollar bill dictates my rights.
Right.
And it's unbridled by the community's involvement in the decision making of how my money should be represented or repatriated. Not redistributed.
All right. So
anyway,
I'm running out of brain power, and we have different ideas of what capitalism is. So
maybe for another episode.
Maybe for another time. Because there's definitely such thing as predatory capitalism, which I'm still against that. I never lost that.
No, you've never given the impression that you were in favor of it. Don't worry.
So, but I'm definitely running out of brain power. Like I said, COVID vaccine's still hitting me, so I don't have the
cool.
endurance.
Well, thanks for the discussion as always.
Yeah. Hope we gave you guys some food for thought.
Some mental chud to masticate.
You guys definitely learned a lot about me. Don't hold it against me. Yeah, and so
we appreciate the honesty, and everybody's human, and being honest and open helps other people learn from your experiences without repeating them. So I think it's very important and valuable. I'm grateful that you
did wrong and right. So,
thanks for tuning in to Frivolous Gravitas.
See you guys.
Have a good one.